Thank you very much. Please have a seat, Mr. Rockström, and we'll get some other famous scientists here up on our stage. I don't see them. Ah, there we are. Thank you very much. For Professor Leptin, please come up to the stage. Welcome, the President of the European Research Council. Have a seat. And to discuss these topics, we need a Nobel Laureate. So thank you very much. Professor Brian Schmidt is here, astrophysicist, the former head of the Australian National University. Welcome on the stage. Professor Rockström, just follow up on your little doomsday presentation. Since we have a different topic here on this panel now, good news in climate science, can you give at least one latest really good news for climate? Please find one.
Well, actually, there is, I think it is a good news that the curve is starting to really flatten out, and we're very close to a bending point. The other good news is that China is probably 1 or 2 years away from peaking emissions.
Yes.
And the third one, I think, is the point that we have so much evidence today that you can decouple economic development from emissions, and that emission reductions can be done even without subsidies in a competitive way, particularly when it comes to phasing out coal.
Professor Leptin, Professor Rockström said in a recent interview that even the scientists underestimated the risks of the climate crisis, and now we have seen the pictures, which were really clear. Why isn't the urgency being registered, I don't know, in politics, in society?
It's strange. It's really strange. You know, it's. I think it's registered. It's not reacted to. It's not politicians who discovered climate change. Obviously, it's scientists. It was not last century. It was not this century. It was not last century. It was the middle of the 19th century that the foundations of climate change were beginning to be recognized. So it's been a known fact for a really long time. And why don't politicians listen and act? They're aware of it. We also don't need politicians to tell scientists to do research into climate change. They're curious people, they're citizens themselves, so they're affected. We need to fund them, and the ERC does. I mean, Johan is one of them, one of our grantees. So why do they not listen? Because it's uncomfortable, because there is a clash between needs, and politics, unfortunately, isn't black and white. You have many stakeholders, and so it's uncomfortable. And as Johan just said, what matters is that we have found ways, or that it's beginning to be seen how we can turn around without damaging some of these other interests.
Mm. Professor Schmidt,
based on science and based on fundamental research. We mustn't forget that. Without that, nothing goes.
Professor Schmidt, when I was listening to Professor Rockström, I was thinking about you are an astrophysicist. So are you sure we don't have a planet B somewhere out there?
Well, there are planet Bs. They're just a long ways away.
Okay.
So I would not be counting on a planet B unless you got about 1 billion years up your sleeve.
Okay, so okay, we let's stay here then. Okay, on the planet. You are the outsider here when it comes to Europe. You have the view from Australia, from America. How do you see what Europe does? We've seen the environmental ministers just weakened the target a couple of days ago for for tackling the climate crisis. They reaffirmed Paris, but they weakened the target. Is that already the beginning of a not very tough policy against climate crisis anymore?
Well, okay, so Europe has shown a lot of leadership, in my opinion, over the last 25 years. But the politics that Maria just was talking about are at play here. I think what my encouragement to Europe is to have the confidence to do more, to take a leadership role globally. This is a global problem. It's not just a European problem. And Europe can't just think about fixing itself. So let's think of the border adjustment mechanism. Mm-hmm. That's a European thing, the world, it needs to be not a European border adjustment. It needs to be a world a mechanism.
But
So
what if they don't want to do it with us?
well, you need to spend, how much time is Europe spending out, diplomatic circles, out pushing the world to adopt this? Have they been to Australia and said, why don't you come and join us? Have they been to Japan? Have they been to China?
Yeah.
So that is where I think Europe has a chance to stand up and make a difference. Because Europe actually has been pretty engaged. But like most countries, they always think, oh, well, we're just Europe. And we have deferred collectively to the United States. The United States has kind of left the building right now. And I would encourage Europe to think, okay, we need to take a leadership role. And I think the world's maybe more listening than you think.
Can we afford it? Yeah, thank you very much. The question is there someone relevant in European politics who really thinks we can afford to get this role, Professor Rockström? Can we afford to be a leader again? There's nobody I've talked to lately who is still thinking that Ursula von der Leyen's speech a couple of years ago, the man on the moon moment, we're going to be the first continent, that there's somebody really thinking about this speech in a very positive way. It's like, we want to save the industry. We don't want to restructure it.
I mean, to start with, a slight correction, which is that, I mean, the world is not doing enough, but the world is relative in the end, and Europe is the world's climate leader, still is, and has been for a long time. The most ambitious climate law is here in Europe. And one should recognize that. So I'm very much with you, Brian, here. I think also that has to go much more into diplomacy campaign at a global level to get the CBAM, for example. I mean, the CBAM, I think, once it's introduced in Europe, can have a spillover effect towards creating an organic development towards a global price on carbon. And that would be, I think, a tremendously useful step forward. But you're right, Michael, that we need to see a leadership in Europe that steps up one further step. And do we have that today? Well, I think, to be honest, that the bravest leader in Europe today, in my view, is Christine Lagarde at the European Central Bank, standing very strong on risks related to the economy in Europe. I think also that the European Commission with Wopke Hoekstra and Ursula von der Leyen are really good pair and driving as much as they can. And I would also actually argue that if you look at Germany, France, Spain, the big economies in Europe are kind of on board. I think we need to be better at communicating the fact that not only that the fossil fuel-based path is a dead end, but also, which they know, of course, but they need even more proof points to show that the pathway to decarbonize the European economy is a winning path. It's the path towards prosperity, towards a much more competitive European economy. And we have the evidence pieces there. It's just this we are at this gauntlet point of a transformation, which of course is painful for many who are sitting stuck in yesterday's, so to say, energy mix. But I think we need to and can put forward much more of the evidence that already today you can actually be successful through investments in a decarbonized path.
Professor Leptin, you're more or less the ambassador of the European research and science ecosystem, let me say, put it like this. When we look back to the corona pandemic, science-guided action, political action during this pandemic, why is it no longer doing so when it comes to the existence of the planet?
First of all, I'm not the ERC is a small part of the EU budget. It's important because it has a huge impact. So if it had a larger part of the EU budget, it would have an even larger impact.
Very good. Okay, good point.
So what was the question?
The impact on the politics. Good point, Professor Leptin, good point. The impact on politics from science. I'm trying to get from science to politics now. Why aren't they listening to the scientists where they were listening during the pandemic?
Well, I don't think the pandemic is a very good example.
Mostly.
Well, even in Europe, You know, a lot of strain was put on scientists in the pandemic to come up with answers instantaneously because people were dying, and that put scientists in a corner where they didn't always react correctly. They reacted with certainty in cases where there was no certainty, and this really played cards against us, the scientists, because the time to explain the principle of uncertainty in Johan's last slide here and elsewhere, that stupid spoof movie, Don't Look Up, but it makes that point very clearly. If there's 4% uncertainty whether that comet is going to hit the planet, you scientists don't even know whether it's going to hit the planet. So I think COVID actually did the opposite for us.
Okay.
It reduced the credibility of scientists. It shouldn't have done, because everybody was doing the best they possibly could, but it was misinterpreted. And so I think that's a problem. It's not so much a problem with politicians. Really, I think politicians, I can only go back to what I said before, is they just have too many tangible goals to serve that are immediate, instantaneous, with people who are going to shoot them if they don't serve those. And, it's always comfortable to think, well, but there is the green bit. But I wanted to say one of the things about good things in climate: we have youth, we have the young people, and that's what we should use more. It's not old folks like us, it's the young people on the street that have helped a lot, and if only we could continue to have them mobilized.
And the young people here in the audience as well, yes. Professor Schmidt, let's talk about science and politics in another way. Why we have a debate here in Germany about the narrative, the communication. Maybe we shouldn't say Nachhaltigkeit so often. Maybe we shouldn't say Klimawandel so often. We need to find a new narrative. That's what the climate scene discusses in order to approach the politics or the critics. Is that true in a way, or is it a debate far off track to find a new narrative? Like, for example, we need it's economic policy. It's not climate policy. It's economic policy to tackle the climate crisis.
Well, we certainly need to have a narrative that makes sense and resonates with people, and that might evolve over time. But the narrative has to be based on the truth of what's going on. So it has to be a way of telling the truth. And so one of the challenges I think we have, just getting to some of the other questions you were asking, is politicians' way of survival is getting elected. So Stephen Chu, a fellow laureate who worked in the Obama administration I've just been with, as he always likes to say, Brian, the first rule of politics is to get elected, the second rule is to get reelected, and the third rule is refer to rules 1 and 2 when in doubt. And what we're seeing is that the science we're talking about has essentially a payback 5, 10, 20 years, and elections happen at 3, 4, and 5 years. So COVID was very immediate, so there was a certain engagement, but the things we're talking about, even what Johan's just talking about, are still 10, 20. He's talking about, that 3 degrees is in 2100. We're all going to be dead in 2100. The young people may not be, but the point being is we have to get narratives that resonate with the 100-year notion, when all of our political narratives tend to be on the 24-hour narrative, not even a year in advance. They're literally 24-hour narratives. And I'll be honest, it is probably not the job of a physicist to figure out, more of a media person, to figure out how to get in and out of this 24/7 media cycle.
That's a different panel. That's downstairs. Professor Rockström. But still, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Donald Trump. Imagine you have, let's say, probably for Donald Trump, 3 minutes, only 3 minutes in the Oval Office with him. And he's so crucial for this global tackling climate crisis issue. What would you say?
Yeah, we've actually played with that idea, and I would say I only need 2 minutes.
That's good. You would
Yeah.
start with that.
It would be actually quite easy, I think, to
we say?
make him shift. And the reason is that if you want to make America great again, and if you want to be on a winning path, you don't want to be going back to the coal mine. You want to invest in the modern, secure, healthy, prosperous, decarbonized, sustainable future. That is so well evidenced that it's quite remarkable that we've failed in our narratives with him, because I think he's very agnostic. He's someone who, he had Tesla electric cars on the White House, and not even thinking about that he was actually basically a big advocate for the decarbonization. And so I think he could actually be cuddled, but the mistake that has happened in the US is that everything has been baked together into one, dichotomy where DEI and everything that has to do with equity and all gender issues and, climate issues are put in the same basket. And that is in itself a tremendous failure, of course. But I think one needs to lift out the climate topic and make it, exactly as Brian says, a narrative of security, of prosperity, of stability, and of health. And we have all the evidence for that. And we also have the evidence that it's a more attractive, modern, technologically advanced future. This is the science-driven future that the US, of course, has been leading on for the past 50 years. And if they want to be a leader in the future, this is the path to go. This is what Trump is doing right now is the most secure way to lose in the competition against China. China is just moving ahead very rapidly. It's just remarkable. I mean, for those of you who've been in Beijing recently, two things strike you. One is the clean air, and secondly, it's completely silent. Everything is electric. They're moving ahead. And of course, this is something that I think you could... Now, I've used more than 2 minutes, I realize, but so that was a longer version. We don't need that much with Trump. He won't listen anyway. And by the way, let me say also something more perhaps provocative. I think we should thank Trump for one... There are not many things to thank President Trump for, but one thing is that he's forcing us to change the narrative. And I think this is quite healthy, actually. This has been coming for quite a long time. We've realized, as environmental scientists, that we have completely failed. We have allowed ourselves to place the climate and environmental topic as something out on the fringe. It's about moral obligations. It's about sacrifice. It's about stepping backwards. That's been the wrong interpretation. We've been moving very, very successfully, I think, over the last 10 years towards showing that this is a path to prosperity and security. But with Trump, it kind of accelerates that now we really are embarking on a different language. And it's so, like Brian says, it's fact-based, actually. 5 years ago, we could not say that you can actually power the global economy with green energy successfully. But today we can. We know that essentially in all markets in the world, we can actually replace, particularly coal. You don't have no excuse to produce electricity with coal in any economy in the world today. It's much smarter to do it with green technologies.
Then let's turn it around to Brian, who is an Australian, so he's a neighbor of China. So let's talk about China in a bit. Is it? Almost.
It's only a 10-hour flight. Better than here,
for
that's
us,
for sure.
for our perspective, you're very close to China.
Yes.
Neighbors. Can China's green tech stimulus push us at the end all to the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I was just with Stephen Chu in China, and the acceleration that's going on there has to be seen to be believed. In the last 12 months, I think both Stephen and I kind of saw China move 5 years into the future. And I mean, it's like a sci-fi movie what's going on there. So it's going to push us. But I will say they're really good at making things big, drawing the cost curve down, but they're still using the basic innovations that are coming out of the US, Germany, Australia. And so there's a partnership possibility there, okay, that we need to see not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Because, the solar that we all use, that's an Australian invention, okay? The actual PERC technology done by a colleague of mine in Australia. Australia got not a cent out of it directly, But of course, we're the largest per capita uptake of the technology. And the reason it's worth billions upon billions a year to us in Australia is because China managed to bring the cost down to such a low level. So we're going to have to think, rather than it being a threat, them taking our ideas away, that we're going to have to think of them as a partnership. And I think China now has its own intellectual property, so they're actually more worried about protecting intellectual property. I think you'll find that they're in a mood to be a partner rather than the raider that we're all concerned about. So we're going to have to think about partnership with them, in my opinion.
Professor Leptin, you wanted to add to this?
Briefly to both. So I always love listening to Johan because of the reason, the facts, the data, the intelligence. I'm not sure that would carry any weight with President Trump because he works on fear. So I would say to him, Mar-a-Lago is going to disappear under the ocean.
Ah,
but,
there we are.
And that is a fact.
Boom.
Good idea.
With regard to China, last 12 months, 5 years, absolutely, and it's been going longer and it's been more progress. In my field, in the life sciences, they're no longer relying on our advances on which to build. They're making them like there's no tomorrow. We'll rely on them in that.
Yeah.
The idea that Europe is leading in knowledge production and all we're lagging behind is in innovation, forget it. We're not leading in knowledge production. US and China are now. So, yeah. What can we say? We have to take our responsibilities seriously. We have to take our responsibilities for data, climate data seriously. I already said that this morning. Anyway, that's...
One question to you and also to the professors Rockström and Schmidt. Can AI, can the technology do a difference when it comes to the exponential rise of the climate crisis? And maybe we can really do a prognosis on this, but can it be the change we definitely need when it comes to technology for climate?
Technology is fundamental, but technology will not do it alone. We know that we also need behavioral change. We need actually a redistribution of wealth. And we also know that the two transformations that will take us back towards a safe climate future is the food system transformation and the energy transformation. And the food system transformation has a lot to do with healthy diets and preferences that we make. So it's a combination.
Sorry?
Well, yeah. So the technology is coming along, and I think, you know, the technology we need to make the transition is sort of already exists. It needs to be improved. The technology cost curve needs to be drawn down. The thing we're really struggling is on the human side. How do we get humans to work collectively towards a global goal when we don't trust each other? We're worried about them taking our jobs and them taking our jobs. So there's a real human political side that is the barrier. That's the wall we have to get across. It's not actually the technology side. That part I think we've kind of dealt with.
Yeah.
Science has more or less done its part.
It's man-made. Mankind can change it. Technology is only a bypass. All right, I have to understand that. Then we have to talk to a man who is changing or not changing the fight against climate crisis, a politician we welcome on the panel now. But first of all, I have to say thank you, Professor Rockström, Professor Leptin, and Professor Schmidt, for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.